This video is brought to you by privacy.com.
I like watching you sleep.
It's weird to think that there was a time before the movie Cars existed, when people thought that Pixar, then not even owned by Disney, would be able to bring any story about anthropomorphic anything to life in an interesting, emotionally loaded, and oftentimes revolutionary way in the realm of animation, and when, if you were to search for the hottest model in vehicular transportation, the results weren't all clogged up by Larry the Cable Guy as a buck-toothed tow truck. And no, I'm certainly not saying Cars was not able to carry over that same magic in some ways, but it's no secret either that what most Pixar fans are thinking when the name Cars is mentioned is not a single one-off, masterfully crafted story just begging to be told, but rather Pixar's equivalent of a masterfully calculated franchise just begging to be put out of its misery. It's widely accepted that Cars 2 is the single worst movie Pixar's ever brought out. And although that is debatable, I will say that it is the worst sequel they have put out, and it was also the most unnecessary. Well, story-wise. For Lasseter's Hawaii shirt collection funds, this film's merch sale seems to have been more than necessary. It steered away from the first film harder than any of the future sequels would, where they would rather expand on a plot element set up or hinted at in the original, and went in a completely different direction. It was basically this generation's Back to the Future 3. And ultimately, also what turned most everyone off from this franchise, figuring that all is lost for these talking cars. It was a dumb idea anyway. Who would ever think to make a movie about talking cars? I mean, what's next? Trains? Planes? Alright, I already know you're gonna have one of the following reactions. Either A, you had no idea this movie existed and are currently in a state of denial, or B, you knew it existed and are experiencing severe Nam flashbacks right now. But either way, you're in for a treat, because this isn't your ordinary Cars knockoff movie to ride on the wave of its success, or a very, very intricate fan animation. This is an official licensed Disney movie that came out in 2013 theatrically, and there's two of them. Why? Why? Just think, all those resources, all that budget that went into getting a Cars spin-off into production. We could get a whole new 2D animated Disney film that doesn't feature a main protagonist looking like an escape from your local zoo. These movies cost $100 million to make, and while Cars 2 seems to be a film everyone would rather forget was ever released to begin with, no one seems to even recall these existed, let alone watch them. Now okay, for all the shit you can give Pixar for milking Cars for all it's worth, I can at least see what they're getting at. Cars are undeniably profitable and a huge hit with kids from an early age, and I don't have to tell you what a ginormous hit the toyline was across the board. It surpassed pretty much all other marketing sales Pixar ever had with their films combined, but planes? Planes! Now, I wasn't really into any sort of moving objects as a kid to begin with, but I don't recall any of my friends going, "Oh man, you see that sick plane that dude is flying?" That seems to be more of a niche, and adding doofy eyes onto them seems unlikely to broaden the market. Doesn't sound like an idea that could ever really take off. Just plain and simple. Sounds like a plane wreck. It's a plane wreck. I'm starting to think I should not be one to complain. If anything, it was likely Disney who made the decision to put these films in the works. The first two Cars films may not have done phenomenally at the box office, but still exposed kids to the toys they would soon be begging their parents to buy them, and in a similar fashion, although Planes was initially conceived to only be a direct-to-DVD spin-off, it was released theatrically back in August 2013. It was actually made by Disney Toon Studios and not Pixar, in spite of what the animation may have led you to believe. This was the studio responsible for bringing you all your favorite Disney sequels, like Cinderella 2, Aladdin, Return of Jafar, The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, Cinderella 3, and the now cancelled Hunchback of Notre Dame 3, which, according to my sources, would have been a full 90 minutes of Quasimodo piece by piece placing each of the shattered remains of his home back to where they once stood. A truly riveting tale, much like all their films, but alas, the second Planes movie, released only a year after its predecessor, would turn out to be one of their last productions, as the company, under the lead of John Lasseter, was shut down in 2018 for reasons. Wait, did I read that right? The second Planes was released only a year after? Oh my god! These two theatrical Disney features get released pretty much back to back. That's insane! They used to barely even put any sequels out in theaters, and to then have one come out right after the first? this really is just like Back to the Future 3. Yeah, so I really wouldn't have as big an issue with either of these films as I do had either brought anything unique to the table. But should you ever be forced to watch this, like I was many times, gotta love younger siblings, you'll likely be quick to notice just how redundant they are. We got our main protagonist Dusty, a young crop duster plane who is fed up with his job and longs to become a racer. Along comes a veteran willing to teach the rookie his ways, and as he takes off to partake in the competition, he befriends a colorful cast of characters but also makes enemies. They're real mean. They want to make it so he doesn't win. This whole film is ridiculously predictable. I could name you every single one of Dusty's personality traits by looking at the poster alone. In fact, I'll do it right now. Here we go. None. In fact, all the characters in this film seem to have been sucked out of every last drop of originality or charm. We got the Mater clone, we got the Sally clone, the Doc Hudson clone. It's like Disney knew they wanted to have a Cars underdog story with a new cast to sell even more merch, but forgot they needed to add a story too, which is surprising because according to them, they actually tried to make sure to have this feel as little like a rehash of Cars' story as possible, but those were also the same guys pretending to have released this theatrically because it was just of such great quality. So I wouldn't be too certain about the validity of their claims. Also because they already rehashed Mater for their previous film and did it again.
I wish I was separated at birth.
It genuinely wouldn't surprise me if they just took all the assets they had lying around from the previous films and recycling them for these. They did the same with Cars 2, where the ending was initially thought up to be the first film, and then again with a short that was released alongside Planes that had a sequence identical to one from Cars 1. It's sort of amazing to find something in the same realm as Cars 2 that I would argue is much worse than that film in almost every way. The insanely predictable premise to this one plays out the way you would expect. Dusty ends up winning the competition after a bunch of back and forth with his competitors, finds a love interest, interacts with overly stereotypical Mexican planes, and makes the occasional boner joke. It's not hard to see why John Cryer opted out of this one, is it? The characters in this movie have some of the ugliest designs I've ever seen in my life. I never thought Cars had all that appealing an aesthetic either, and the rules for why cars would even need houses or food make just as little sense as they used to here, but at least they knew how to shade them properly. And make it so the eyes in each of them doesn't look like stickers you'd find in a Kinder Surprise toy egg. I know it can't be easy to design appealing anthropomorphic planes, if there was one thing I learned from JJ it was that, but they really were just looking at what Pixar was doing and poorly copy-pasted those existing limb models and textures onto existing plane models they had lying around without fully knowing how to blend them together. These are the models you're supposed to not only look at for 90 minutes, but get invested in and get their emotions based on the expressions alone, which is pretty much all you have for unmoving objects such as planes. Cars was able to do it, so why isn't Planes? It could be because they just didn't have as good a script to work with, or because the voice acting didn't portray their emotions well enough, or maybe it was just due to their eyes. It's so weird how close together their eyes are. It's like they're all about to mold together and form one single blob eye, which I hear is not very convenient for flying. And you know what else isn't? Having a fear of heights. Which Dusty has. That's the hook. That's why we're supposed to care about him. A plane that is afraid of heights. I mean, that's like making monsters afraid of children or sea creatures afraid of water. I think they really jumped the shark with this one.
Hey, that's my family you're talking about.
You don't have to stoop that low. You can call this film on plenty other points, like on how the editing is just atrocious. There was one scene where Dusty was flying toward a train in a tunnel, and right as they were about to crash, the music just made a full stop. There was no lead up, no nothing, and the film just goes on as if nothing happened. Or that scene where his mentor was out in the field attempting to take off but couldn't because his dark secret was tying him down, even though we barely had an idea of who this character was. You gotta lead up to moments like these. If you're trying to go for shock value and make them resonate, it can't just happen out of nowhere. The whole film just felt like a series of shorts that were stitched together to try and create something that would have the bare minimum required for kids to be somewhat entertained. If they were able to get all the character designs, which even my little brother wasn't. So Lord knows, if they weren't able to then they wouldn't get used to them in the sequel either. Unless you were to introduce a whole new slew of characters that serve just as little purpose and make references to cop shows from 30 years ago. Cause that's what kids are into? If there's one thing I can give the sequel, it's that there are a little less stereotypes in this than the first one. They appear as background characters once or twice, but it's mostly about Dusty needing to come to terms with the fact that his racing days are over and becomes a firefighter to help out his friends. They have a lot more varied locations and better editing in this one, but the pacing and writing are as awful as ever, and also I lied, the stereotypes are more present than ever. This really types my stereos. The second movie just might be even worse than the first. It's not by a lot, but right now I'm trying to picture a scenario in which you would go, hey, you know what I could go for? That Pixar ripoff movie by Disney itself called Planes, and then liking that film so much you decide to also watch the sequel. Hey, why don't you watch the Planes ripoffs too if you're such a big fan? The animation is about as good, you just have to get used to new characters, which one should be trained for thanks to all these films and the Cars cinematic universe. While I personally think the third and likely last Cars movie that would come out in 2017 was miles better than Cars 2, and in some ways even Cars 1, Planes started out so poorly that it likely never would have recovered even with the now cancelled third entry. I was never a huge fan of the Cars franchise to begin with, but one thing you could always give them is that they at least had heart to them and good intentions at their core. Cars 1 was about letting go of your ego and finding value in friendship. The third film was all about character growth and that it's okay to not always be the very best and maturity. And Cars 2 was also a movie that existed, but both of these Planes films just clearly didn't have the same heart to them that most of these Pixar stories have, which would have made getting over the weaker visuals a lot easier. Cars 2 at least had quite a few interesting locations thanks to the road trip narrative, far more so than in either of the Planes movies, which would allow for that perfectly. In a way, it's sort of sad these were the last films produced by Disney Toons. I feel a weird nostalgia for some of these sequels they put out. The only fans of these films are likely kids that grew up with them, which I won't blame you for. They're definitely not the worst films I've ever seen, though in terms of theatrical Disney releases, they're pretty high up. I wouldn't have paid money to see this in cinema. Who knows if I even have enough money on my bank account? What if there was another data breach and my banking information was stolen? I wouldn't even have the nerve to just casually watch Disney's Planes. Thankfully, privacy.com is here to help. What they do is give you the option to create a brand new credit card for any new purchase you make online, as so to ensure it doesn't fall victim to hackers or identity thieves. You can also set a maximum spending limit on each of these cards, and all of this is entirely free of charge. So what you can do is download the free privacy extension, install it to your browser, and visit any site you want. From there, anytime you want to buy something, it would give you the option to create a new card that you can either keep or just throw away after you're done. This is also really useful if, say, you want to set up a subscription to your favorite streaming service for a specific amount of time. You can just use one of Privacy's cards to set up your account, set a limit on your card, and as soon as that amount you assign it runs out, it can charge you any more after that, effectively cancelling the subscription and therefore avoiding potential costs you only found out about when it's already too late. And this goes for any way you shop online. No harm made and completely separate from your main account. If this was enough to intrigue you, then maybe you should let me finish talking, because on top of that, you can also now get a whole $5 to use next time you buy anything. That's $5 they just give you. They did the same to me, it was insane. All you have to do is go to privacy.com/Cosmodore or clicking the link in the description. So thanks privacy.com for sponsoring this video and allowing me to watch literally anything other than Disney's Planes.